the Torah in Parshat Mishpatim, which deals with many, many laws that pertain between man and his fellow man, that a person is obligated to act justly towards all people. It sums up a section by saying, the Anshe Kodesh Tihunli, that you, the Jew, should be men of holiness. That's the goal of everybody's existence, to live a holy life. And basar basar treifa, and meat, animals that you find have been killed in the field, you're not permitted to eat them. Okay, we know that in order to be able to eat meat, it has to have shchita, kosher slaughter. So therefore, if an animal is torn apart by another animal, or has a disease and it dies from the disease, or even if it just dies naturally without shchita, you're not allowed to eat it. But then the verse ends by saying, "Kelef tashlichun osa," you should feed it, cast it to the dog. So that's interesting. Why is the Torah telling us what to do with it, or why you should give it to the dog? So the basic idea is, you have to know how the Torah communicates. The basic idea is that even though one is prohibited from eating it, other forms of consumption are permitted. Hana, benefit, you can derive benefit, which is not true by all forbidden foods. For example, the most serious of them being meat and milk, like cheeseburgers. Meat and milk that have been cooked together become prohibited in eating and also deriving any benefit from it. However, ordinary non-kosher meat, you're not allowed to eat it, but you could use it, you could feed it to your animal, which is a benefit. You have to feed your animal. So, okay, if that's the case, though, why is the Torah using this example? The example of casting it to the dog. So Rashi says there's an important point over here, and that is here the Torah is giving the dogs a reward. For what? For the fact that they didn't make any growling noises. They didn't bark on the night that the Jews left Egypt. It says, "Lo yecharatz kelev l'shono," that when you go out from Egypt, you'll have total security, and even dogs won't growl. And now God does not withhold the reward, so they're being given their reward. The reward is that people will give them the meat that they can't eat. But this poses a question. First of all, why is that so important? In the saga, the Exodus, we're talking about big things, Jews being liberated from oppression. So what difference does it make? If the dogs would have barked, they wouldn't have barked. How much of an issue would that have been? But secondly, why do they deserve a reward? Reward and punishment is part of God's justice. But that's because a person chooses to do the right thing, so he deserves a reward. But do you tell me that the animals on that night of their own, they had free will, and they decided we're not going to bark at the Jews? No, that was a miracle. God arranged it so that for whatever the cause is, they wouldn't bark. But if that's the case, it was done by God. Why did the dogs deserve a reward? It wasn't a matter of choice. So I would say two things. First of all, the dog's not barking shows the extent to which God was concerned with the night of the Exodus, the night of redemption, that God was concerned for the status, the safety, the security. That is to say, if dogs bark, would have annoyed people, would have frightened people, would have frightened children. So the Geula, the redemption, would not have been complete. So even to that extent, God arranged it that it should be a complete redemption with no fears affecting them as they left Egypt. And secondly, in terms of the reward, I don't think it's because the dogs deserve something that they earned the reward. Rather, it's to commemorate this miracle. This itself constitutes a new miracle in the whole scheme of things. And that is when a person has meat and he's getting rid of it, if he gives it to the dog, it brings to mind this entire idea, the closeness of God to individuals as we seek to fulfill His will. And that is to say, it reminds us of the divine providence which attended us to the extent that when we left Egypt, not only were we freed from actual dangers, but also in terms of anything that could have disturbed our tranquility. God cares about our tranquility because we have to utilize, we have great work to do. We have to study, we have to understand, we have to do the mitzvahs. So therefore, the tranquility, a person's state of mind, is extremely important. As the Rambam says, one must take care of one's health. Physical health, because if a person is in a state of pain, he can't do the mitzvahs properly, but also psychological health. We don't think about that enough. It's very important for a person to do whatever he can do to maintain the appropriate psychological state. Excessive unhappiness, excessive brooding, excessive depression is painful in itself, but also it prevents a person from obtaining the really true level of the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu.